Well, I was out at Oracle, Richard, 2 weekends ago and had a chance to be with Stephen Gamble, who was assisting with the rituals out there.
Was he hilarious?
Of course.
We have had so much fun together over the years. He's just a natural human being, and put it that
Yeah,
way.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, it had been years since I'd seen him just because of the pandemic and everything. So it was good to be back in physical space with them.
good.
Yeah.
How many came to that?
I think there was like somewhere between 45 and 50.
Oh, it's fairly small,
Yeah.
but back at the spot in Arizona, huh?
No, this one was at John Knox Ranch in Texas.
Oh, Texas.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, it was good it was actually a pretty good mix of sort of new and old, and
oh, wonderful.
they made an effort to invite some younger guys there too as well. So it was a very dynamic group. Yeah, it's good.
Where I did my rights, Texas.
What?
That's where I did my rights, was in Texas.
Oh, in Texas.
Mhm.
I was there once. All right, I'm getting rid of this throat mint or whatever it is.
The lozenge. Well, we were gonna just take a few moments to kind of center down. So maybe we can just do that now while the folks on your end are figuring out the tech.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah. So let's just invite us to take a moment to maybe close our eyes or fix our gaze low. Take a nice inhale and exhale. And I'll read this Thomas Merton quote, and then I'll ring the bowl, and we'll have about 5 minutes of silence. And I'll read the quote again to bring us out of it, and then we'll move into our time together. These are the words of Thomas Merton. He says, "There is in all visible things an invisible fecundity, a dimmed light, a meek namelessness, a hidden wholeness. This mysterious unity and integrity is wisdom, the mother of all, natura naturans. There is in all things an inexhaustible sweetness and purity, a silence that is a fount of action and joy. It rises up in wordless gentleness and flows out to me from the unseen roots of all created being, welcoming me tenderly, saluting me with indescribable humility. This is at once my own being, my own nature, and the gift of my Creator's thought and art within me. Speaking as Heia Sophia, speaking as my sister, wisdom." There is in all visible things an invisible fecundity, a dimmed light, a meek namelessness, a hidden wholeness. This mysterious unity and integrity is wisdom, the mother of all, natura naturans. There is in all things an inexhaustible sweetness and purity, a silence that is a fount of action and joy. It rises up in wordless gentleness and flows out to me from the unseen roots of all created being, welcoming me tenderly, saluting me with indescribable humility. This is at once my own being, my own nature, and the gift of my Creator's thought and art within me. Speaking as Hagia Sophia, speaking as my sister, wisdom. May it be so.
God, that's good.
Yeah, right.
He always knows how to say it.
Yeah. Well, Richard, we'll just jump right in. So, first question: what does wholeness mean to you?
Wow. Okay. Thank you for not letting me practice these answers. They're coming. I experience it, and that's all I could say. When there's no resistance in me, when there's no oppositional fighting, opposing energy, I fall back, and there's something already there that I don't have to manufacture, and it feels like a pre-existing gift, a gift that is awakened rather than created. It doesn't mean, and this is an important distinction, it doesn't mean psychological perfection, or you can still be a broken person, and we all are. You can still have significant faults. And that's an important distinction to make, because we've confused psychological wholeness with spiritual wholeness. The hidden wholeness is God within us. And it's not presuming we're even emotionally healthy. I've met people who are not mentally or emotionally healthy, but who have discovered the hidden wholeness. That they have a path now to greater and greater health. And all they have to do is become aware of it and then draw upon it. How's that?
There are no right answers here, Richard. So
Very good.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, could you tell us a story from your life when you felt truly whole?
Well, let me say, first of all, just because I felt it doesn't mean that it's there. It is there, but it isn't dependent upon me feeling it. I have to know it. And that's probably why they use the word belief. Belief is different than feeling something. Now, it's wonderful when you do feel it. A moment that has come back to me many times. I don't think I've ever talked about it. Oh, it was 25 years ago. I was teaching, of all places, in Japan. And I was sitting at a desk in the room they had given me, and it looked right out at a hillside, just maybe 2 feet away from the window. And I had the window open maybe 3 inches. And I sat there journaling at a desk, and wind came through that window after blowing the grasses on the hill. And it was the same wind that blew the grasses and that touched me. And that was it. And I had it. I remember not wanting to leave that desk. It was just, it was like it blew in the window. It blew, and I wasn't even asking for such a moment of wholeness. I think I had been prepared for it. I don't know if you've ever been to Japan, but the architecture, the culture is, in my opinion, the most aesthetic, beautiful culture on earth. Everything is beautiful. Everything is clean and ordered. And after several days of walking through temples and experiencing the grace of the Japanese people, my heart was very softened. I can see how ritual can prepare you for seeing. The ritual of everything is ritual in Japan. Everything. It's and that carefulness about how they operate set me up for this moment that the wind through the window would announce to me. So there was prep. I didn't know it was prep until it happened. And there's nothing to say beyond that. You can't describe it. It's just, it's ultimate okayness. This is okay. I'm okay. You're okay, as we used to say it in the 60s. I don't know how people live without that. I don't think they're supposed to live without that. I don't think they can live in the full meaning of that term without such knowing. Because now you're not just analyzing this little Richard self, but you're enjoying a self that includes everything else. You're at home in this world. And notice I didn't try to use what you and I think of as God language. I'm all for God language, but it at this point in history, it eliminates too many people who didn't grow up with God language. And so if you use it too quickly, they feel left out. And we don't want to do that. Because of this mystery, that's what makes it wholeness. Wholeness. No one is left out, or it wouldn't be wholeness. Okay, that's enough. Get me started on these
Make
wonderful
my
things.
Unitarian Universalist heart sing, Richard. We don't come from the God language lands ourselves, so you're speaking our language. Yeah.
And I'm not against God language. You know that.
No, of course.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Well, can you share with us a story, a time? I know you just spoke about feeling and believing, but a time when you didn't feel whole in your life.
There have been plenty. It's not like I'm searching which one of the many. After I'd shown irritation at somebody, after I had to impose my values or feelings or thoughts on someone else's, that was for me an act of separation from them. And when I acted on that, I felt lousy afterwards because I knew it was me that did that, and yet It was the very small part of me. It wasn't the whole me. The whole me can always forgive, can always accept, but it's very hard to hold on to the whole me all day. In moments of tiredness or irritation, you lose it. So that's the meaning of daily practice, daily prayer to regain the hidden wholeness. Is that an answer?
You mentioned the utility of daily practice in relation to wholeness. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
You know, it becomes more true for me, if that's possible for things to become more true. I guess it is. The older I get, because here, as many years as I've tried to practice contemplation, meditation, I still know that if I get caught up in a feeling reactivity to the moment, I lose it. I still lose it. It isn't a permanent mood. The mood, the attitude is lost if you enter into too much conflict or conflicting opinions. And yet you can't remain apart from those. You've got to be a part of the human conversation. Let's take the political conversation. It just so disturbs me today, the level of American conversation about power and people of power and money. And it's just, I want to turn off the computer or the iPhone. They gave me one of those because they wanted to know if I fell over here in my house, that they'd know about it. So I fall many ways, not not just, but this doesn't tell them how I fall in terms of inner attitude and inner love. The physical falling is easy to recover from, but the mental, psychological, spiritual falling creeps up on you. And after an hour of living with it, you take it as normal. At least I do. And if there isn't some practice that cleans the lens again, I remain there and think it's normal. And I forget that wholeness is normal, not judgment or analysis or critique. I hope this is making sense. I'm less coherent in my elder years. You know, I turned 80 a few weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Well, I guess, I don't know. You'd think I'd be more peaceful and loving at 80, but it's still a battle. But it is my desire. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, just as you've been responding here, I've been hearing you speak about wholeness and also conflict. And it seems as though a little bit that conflict, is a sign of not being in wholeness or not feeling into that wholeness. But I guess I'm curious to ask, how does conflict play into our sense of wholeness? How is it necessary for our sense of wholeness?
Yeah. You know, I come at it this way. I don't know if it's the best way, but you've got to first live with what we normally live with, which is the dualistic mind. You've got to see, feel conflicts. You can't start with non duality. In the normal, maybe in the final stages of holiness, you do, but I'm not there yet. You start with the conflict, and you recognize the conflict is largely mentally created. That might take a while, but non-duality peace, they're somewhat the same thing, is a secondary state that follows upon your unpeace, your dissatisfaction with duality. That duality is always dividing the field and taking sides. And you get tired of it after a while because it's never done very much for you except make you irritated and judgmental of other people. So, yeah, you've got to start with dualistic thinking. And this is an important thing to say because a lot of us think you can start every day automatically with non dual freedom. It has to be a surrender, it has to be a choice. You've heard me speak, perhaps, excuse my voice today. You've got to start with order, experience disorder inside of that attempt at non duality, and then you choose reorder. So we're talking about a reordered state that comes from the experience of disorder, but you never eliminate disorder, conflict, if you want to use that word. I hope that's fitting together. If it isn't, please ask me more questions.
Well, that's great. You're doing great, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah.
One never lets themselves do great, but thank you for saying it. You're kind.
Well, the two is always here to support you and tell you how great
Oh,
you're doing.
a
So
loving two. I'll take it.
you're doing great, Richard. So I just want to, we're talking about this phrase, a hidden wholeness.
Yes.
And I guess I'm curious how do you understand what Merton may have meant by that, a hidden wholeness?
Whatever he meant, excuse me, there's something in my eye. It's okay. I think he knew, and I know, it was given to him. He didn't come to it by his education, his rational mind. He came to it by what would be called insight, enlightenment, where you know about the wholeness and you don't know how you know about the wholeness, except that you've touched upon it in moments of love and moments of freedom. So much of Merton's writing is that way. It's just, how did he choose that correct word so well? It's the gift of a wordsmith, but a spiritual wordsmith. Wholeness cannot be proven. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence against it. Psychological unwholeness, which I guess the tradition would call sin, when you choose death instead of life. And we all remain capable of that, I think, till the moment we die. To choose separation over union, to choose resentment over love. Am I answering your question?
Mm-hmm.
I just take off. Bring me back whenever you want to.
Sure.
You can interrupt. I'm too old to think clearly anymore. I am. It just doesn't come.
Thank you. I will. No, you're doing great, Richard. You're doing awesome.
You're kind.
Yeah. I guess I'm interested to just hear your take too on why do you think it's hidden? Why is our wholeness hidden?
Why? You ask very good questions.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think it's intentionally hidden by God, except in this sense that you won't find it unless you want to. So in that sense, it is hidden, and it doesn't impose itself on you. It isn't, as we used to say in philosophy, self-evident unless you're looking. And if you're looking with a prayerful, contemplative mind, you will see it. But if you're not looking, you can find 1,000 reasons not to see it. Your own finitude, again, as we used to say in philosophy, your own brokenness constantly reminds you, I'm not whole, damn it, I'm not whole. And if you just pay too much attention to that, you never get at the starting point. You never get back to the starting point. You know, I've noticed in a number of babies in the last year, I guess parents notice this better than us, but how early on babies smile. And it's usually when they catch their mother or their father's smile. When did your kids, Paul, smile back at you?
It's a good question. I don't know when they actually smiled back at me or when I projected that they were smiling back at me.
Could you hear Paul?
Yeah.
He has two little darlings. But it seems to come early.
Very early, yes.
Very early. If the mother or father makes eye contact and does anything approaching a smile, they get it right back, you know? So it tells me we have it there at the beginning. Original goodness, as you know, is what I think the gospel is teaching us, not original sin. How could we have been so off to think it all starts with original sin? When you start with a problem, you end with another problem. That's all. Problem solving people create problems. And awestruck people fall deeper into awe, deeper into wonder. So I think it starts real early. The readiness of children to giggle and smile gives it away. They're already there and they lose it.
So this question may feel almost blasphemous, but why do you think God chose to hide it from us as adults? Why is it hidden in that way?
Love can only happen inside of ultimate freedom. There's any pressure, you must love, you have to love. If you don't love, I'm going to punish you. You know what? Such love is not love. Merton, in another place, uses a phrase, the brutalities of our own will. There's something brutal when I force myself because I'm afraid of, used to be hell, but now it's just afraid of myself or afraid of freedom. So God ultimately respects human freedom. And he does not give wholeness to anybody who doesn't recognize it and want it. That's ultimate freedom, to want the good. No, it's not to be perfectly good. There can be alternate evidence that I'm not perfectly good, but to want the good consistently is about as good as we can get, I think. And we got to stop hating the parts of us that are still petty. Maybe that's the best word. The small self is petty. That person who did me in, I'm sort of secretly happy that isn't that terrible? I'm sort of secretly happy that they're suffering today. The Germans have a word for it, Schadenfreude. You know German, do you? Oh, good.
Know that word.
Yeah, Schadenfreude. Germans have a word for everything.
Yeah.
You're happy at someone else's shadow, and
Yeah.
it
Tucker
shows
Carlson
itself
got
in
fired.
all of us. We want bad people to suffer, which is why we created this whole myth of hell. We're so convinced that bad people should suffer that we created an eternal state for them where there is no free will, the
Mhm.
opposite of God.
Mm.
All right, I'm sorry. That's all I can say about that.
No, that's fine.
Free
Yeah,
will is important.
sure.
In fact, you could say much of our mistake making in life is to help us discover how free we are, not to do that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that just came to mind. I don't know. I think it's true.
Yeah.
Ask me, ask me a better question.
No, no, you're doing great. Um, so Merton speaks of the hidden wholeness as being intimately tied to the divine feminine in this particular quote.
Hagia Sophia, yes.
Hagia
Holy
Sophia, that's how you
wisdom.
pronounce it. Yeah, wisdom. So for men today, how does this wholeness connect or reflect us being in touch or reclaiming our own divine feminine energy? How is it? How is the idea of wholeness? Is it a feminine concept? Is it a feminine energy?
Well, encounter with the true feminine uh, is for most men their original encounter with wholeness.
Hmm.
You know, without you, I'm nothing. Don't you say to your first girlfriend, I couldn't live without you. Well, they're speaking truth. The feminine awakens wholeness in the male, but there's other things that awaken it, beauty in general, like the Japanese temples, uh, nurturance, symbolized by the baby at the breast. That connotes the feminine, even without the breast, just the taking care of another. Because I've been to a doctor already today. I go to doctors so much now. Uh, when you meet nurses and doctors who are so nurturing, so caring, it's the same thing. And they might be men sometimes. So it's important that I say that because this is much of the gender conflict today. We want to keep the sharp distinction between men and women when it's just not true. The wholeness of a man is inclusive of a woman, and the wholeness of a woman is inclusive of a man. Why does it take us so long to learn that? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious if you have a story from your own life that comes to mind of when a feminine presence or energy helped you understand your own wholeness more completely, or believe or feel.
I can remember my 50 years on the road. I gave men's retreats and priest retreats, but I gave nuns retreats and women's retreats too. And I can remember again and again when I was struggling to say something better or to communicate something, how the women in their grace would more often than not leap in to help me. Richard, is this what you want to say? Uh, it just oh, they're not opposing me because I'm stupid right now. They're helping me because I'm stupid right now. I do think, not in all cases, but in many cases, the whole woman, and I do emphasize whole, arrives at her nurturing state easier than most men do. And I know I'm going to be hated for saying that, but that's one reason I gave men's retreats is we need to work at getting in touch with the inner feminine, which is why, you know, this initiation rites were for men, not for women. Women didn't need them, but we need to be almost pushed into the second half of life, into the whole half of life. Otherwise, we're quite content with a career and security, status and security. Give men that and they're happy, and they don't realize what they're missing. Um, it's no small thing, this emergence of gender studies. And I can see why it's so scary to people like, forgive me, the governor of Florida or certain politicians. They just, you think it was evil itself. And it shows they're trapped on one side, or they would see this.
Yeah.
So this battle, this gender battle, is going to only deepen before it gets better, because we haven't hit the bottom yet of the hatred of the feminine by much of the masculine.
With the pandemic and everything, we're coming out of this time of just an unusual amount of separateness in
Yes.
our culture.
Yes.
You know, we have men facing an epidemic of loneliness, and even just in our programming, you know, often in our, I think all of American culture, especially with men, though, that independence is sort of a virtue, right? As opposed to something
Yes.
maybe we should think twice about. It's like, I'm curious to just hear for you, what do you think are the effects of being held under this spell of separation or separateness, which Joel coined? What do you
Well,
think
the
along?
first obvious thing is existential loneliness. Now, I know the word existential is big for most of us, but it means my very existence is daily an experience of loneliness. It's not an occasional thing, but I've got to do it by myself. The American self-made man. Uh, if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it for me. What does this lead to? The brutalities of your own will, forcing yourself. I've had occasion in the last month to talk to several older men, again, more of my generation, who don't seem to have any social skills, who don't seem to have any awareness of their own emotions. Their vocabulary gives it away. There's no words to describe the subtlety of human emotion.
Mm.
Now, in general, we men are behind women on that. But when you've gotten as old as I am and you still are socially inept, you don't know how to read what people are saying, what people are thinking at all, at all. All you know how to do is resort to law or custom. Uh, well, first of all, I say such men are very unpleasant. Forgive me, God, very unpleasant to be around. They're just, their conversation style is so limited. They'll resort to gruff yeses or gruff no's.
One more question on wholeness. What do you think nature has to teach us about our hidden wholeness, or how does nature help us access it or contact it?
It isn't per se nature, it's the eyes with which nature teaches you to observe it. When you sit quietly and alone in nature for an extended time, I mean, even 20 minutes, just staring, or what I now call gazing, you see that everything, as Gerard Manley Hopkins says, does itself. Each thing does itself. And you'll see a new little animal, you're not even sure what it is, crawling out of the earth. And you look at that little animal and it seems to be totally content. It seems to be. I always say it doesn't want to be a duck, it doesn't want to be a bird, it just wants to be a groundhog. And groundhogs are happy being groundhogs, and they live together with the grasses and trees around them. They make do with what's right in front of them, are able to endure often great difficulty. So you can usually do an endless meditation on what it means to be whole by watching the wholeness of a plant, an animal, or even other human beings who are content. I love the contentedness of animals and plants. Nature has the ability to connect you with realness. The realness of everything shouts itself. I'm this weed, I'm not that flower, and I don't care. I'm happy to be this weed. Whereas we aren't happy to be this weed. We want to be the best flower. And then you see, and then you see how everything submits to death. Everything allows death.
Yeah.
It does death just the way it does life. It's all the lessons are there. So I don't want to say that just because you live in beautiful nature, forgive me, this is the illusion of the wealthy. I just build my house on the top of a mountain in Montana where I can look at ice covered peaks every day and I'll be holy. Some of the most horrible politics in our country comes from some of the most beautiful states. I won't mention them. So just living in beauty doesn't do it. And I say that, of course, in a self-serving way as a boy from Kansas, where it wasn't very beautiful at all. It was just flat. But you know what? When I grew up there, I thought it was beautiful
Yeah.
because the eyes with which I looked at were my dad's eyes, who was a farmer, and he saw how productive and wonderful the land was.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful too.
If you had a prayer for the men of the world, what would it be?
Nothing new happens to the soul outside of moments of vulnerability. Uh, Spatially, we call it liminal space. When you've left one and you haven't entered the new. What we're doing on a men's rite of passage is trying to get them into liminal space. What God is trying to do by illness, by suffering, by empathy with other people's pain, is to make us vulnerable. A moment of unguardedness where I stop trying to assert myself and I let go. Vulnera is a Latin word that means wound.
Hmm.
You have to go to your woundedness. 12 steps discovered this beautifully. And I've got to encourage men who are more guarded than women are in general, not always. In my family, my mother was more guarded than my father. My father was a happy 7. He was so dear. He just allowed the moment to happen, you know. My mother was an 8. She loved me. She loved me deeply, but she was boundaried with what she allowed and what she didn't allow.
Yeah.
So remember, your wounds are the way through, not your wholeness, but your inability to be whole, which makes you long for wholeness. Okay. I know it sounds like a paradox,
Mhm.
but if I were going to name the Christian religion, I would call it the way of the wound.
Mhm.
And that's why the risen Christ had wounds still. That's a brilliant, brilliant piece of art or poetry or religion, that the risen Christ still shows his wounds to the apostles and Mary Magdalene in his hands, in his feet, and his side.
Mhm.
This is amazing. We hide our wounds. I'm the only man I ever know who got my permission for leaving the rites of passage. He came up to me the second or third day, great big man, much bigger than me. He looked down at me, he says, I'm leaving. I said, oh, I'm sorry. Did we do something wrong? He said, well, all these men here are wounded. I'm not wounded like this. I don't need a therapy session. How defended can you be?
Sure.
Not to know all these other people are wounded, but not me.
So is there a prayer in there for the men?
Did you ask for a prayer?
Oh, just a prayer for the men of the world.
Oh,
If you
I'm
have a prayer for
sorry.
the men? No, it's okay.
No, it isn't. I'm not listening. God of all love and freedom, I thank you for Joe and Nathan recording this, and Dawson and Paul here in my room. Bless us as men, and may whoever hears this find in these words freedom and compassion for themselves and one another. We thank you for this day. We thank you in our own name and in all of the holy names of God. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Bye, Nathan.
So good to be together. Thanks for
love
the
you,
little
brother.
extra time.